and start walking our way out across the wall from there. Because what could potentially happen is this. We might start with a full tile here, but when we go over this side here, we could end up with a sliver of a tile, and that will look completely unprofessional. And as DIYers, that's not what we want. We want a professional finish every single time. Likewise, if we start on the countertop might not be level, or indeed it may not be parallel with the actual cabinet up top. And what can happen is if we start working our way up here, we might have a full tile here and a sliver of a pull up here, or indeed when we get up to the top, our tiles may be off like this because it isn't parallel to the actual cabinet base here. So in order to actually make sure we don't fall into any of those pitfalls, and to make sure we get a symmetrical layout where the cuts are equal either side, top and bottom, and the cuts are at least half a tile, all we have to do is make sure we start our layout from a central location on the wall. And it's very simple to actually define the centre of the wall, and this is how you do it. You simply take a tape measure and you measure the full width of the wall. And in this case we have 1 metre, 218 millimetres is the width of the wall. So what I'll do is I'll divide that by 2, and that will give me a central point on the wall here in terms of the halfway point between the left hand side and the right hand side of the wall. So 1 metre 218 divided by 2 leaves me with 609 mil, which I will mark out now. Right. Okay folks, so 1 metre 218 divided by 2 gives me 609 mil. So I'll just mark that now on the actual wall. So that's the halfway point from left to right. Now, what we want to do here, guys, is actually make sure, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that that point we've now made is actually equidistant from here to here, here to here. Because if it's not, what will happen potentially is this. When we cut our tiles around the cabinet, we might be left with a noticeably different size cut on the left hand side or the right hand side. Okay? So once we found the centre of the wall, what we now must do in order to achieve that seemingly elusive professional finish is make sure that the distance from here to here is the same from here to here. So what I'm going to simply do is I'm going to transfer that line up a little bit on the wall. So I can actually take a measurement. That's the 609. And now we're going to take a measurement from the cabinet to the actual line that we made. So that's the centre point on the wall. And what I noticed that when I read what I have here, I have 293 mil to this point here. When I go from this side, I notice I have 307. So obviously there's a difference between the point from here to the cabinet and from here to this cabinet. So what we've got to do to make sure that all the cuts look perfectly the same visually when we look at them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a measurement from here to here, and what I'm going to do then is I'm going to find the halfway point between the two cabinets, because that will be the most visual point on the wall. So I'll take that measurement now, and that's 600. So I'll come out 300 mil and make a line. So now we know, once I draw the plumb line down here and a level line across here, that is going to be the exact centre point of the wall. So in order to achieve that plumb line, I'm going to take a level here. I'm going to register it against that marker made for the halfway point between the two cabinets. And I'm going to make sure the bubble is centred between the two lines in the file. And I'll now strike that halfway line. That's a plumb line now that defines the centre of that wall, like so. And likewise, I will do the same on the horizontal here. So in order to get the horizontal halfway point, what I do is I take a measurement here, and I'll see I have 908 mil. Divided by in half, I have 454. So I'll mark that out now. So 454 mil. Here, and I give a horizontal reference line there. That will give the dead centre of that wall. Now once we're walking off the horizontal line, level line here, and the vertical plumb line here, we will then be assured that all our joint lines will be dead plumb this way and dead level this way. And once we set our first tile, our very first tile, the key tile, off the centre point here, we will then know that we will have equal cuts either side and up against any of the cabinets, and that we will end up then, we can then obviously move our tiles whatever way we want, left or right, up or down, to ensure we don't end up with a sliver and we end up with half a tile against any abutments or the actual countertop or the top of the actual cabinet at the top. Okay, so what we've done now is we've actually determined the exact centre point of the actual wall. What we now need to do is we now need to find out where we're going to start the first tile. So what we'll do is we'll actually look now at the start of the tile for the horizontal wall, okay? So what we want to achieve here is, when we get up to the actual cabinet here, that we don't have a sliver of a cut, that we have half the tiles cut going around it, because it looks far better, gives a professional finish, and like I said before, slivers are really difficult to cut and they don't look very good at all, okay? So let's start off here. What we could do in order to do this, we could actually hold the tiles on the wall and fit them out in a dry fit, okay? That becomes quite awkward and cumbersome to actually do, because obviously they're not stuck on, you're trying to hold a few tiles. It's not too bad in this scenario because it's only 2 tiles width, but it would be quite cumbersome to do it when we're going up the full width of the wall, okay? So what I'm going to do is, instead of having to hold the tiles on the wall dry to see where we're going to position our first tile, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to actually lay them out on a tiling gauge. On a piece of timber, we lay out the dimensions of the tiles, and then all we've got to do is pick up one small tiling gauge and we'll manipulate that on the wall in order to establish the starting point for our very first tile.
Go.
Now folks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually talk you through the process to lay out the actual tiling gauge, like I said a few moments ago, so we don't have to actually be holding the tiles on a dry fit across the wall. We can just pick up the batten and we can position the batten wherever we want on the wall in order to establish where we're going to start our first tile for both the horizontal and the vertical run of tiles. So what we simply do here is we cut a straight piece of timber about the length of 3 or 4 tiles, okay? And we position it like so. Then what we do is we actually position the tiles out just as I've done here, making sure that we actually include the spacers in the actual layout. All we've got to do then is just literally pick up the joint lines, the width of the full tile, the joint line, full tile, joint line and full tile, and then take a square and simply square those lines across. And then to facilitate the layout in a few more moments, what I do is I just mark the centre point on the tile's width on the batten in 2 locations like so. The reason for that will become quite apparent very shortly. Now what this means we can do is we can actually now take this batten and we can actually go to the wall and we can position it in such a way that we can establish the position of the first tile. That will ensure that we get a professional layout that doesn't have any sliver of cuts at any abutments or end to end, top to bottom, and that we actually have half tiles when it comes to cutting in our margin tiles around the wall. So a really, really DIY friendly way of doing this, okay? So I'll actually take you to the wall now and I'll show you how to actually position this in order to achieve that symmetrical, professional layout.
Go.
Okay folks, the next segment deals with actually how to now use our batten in order to achieve that professional symmetrical layout, okay? And the process is very simple, it goes like this. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to establish whether I should start a tile on the line or I should split a tile dead centre on the line. And the reason for this is, like I keep saying, is to make sure that we don't have a sliver of a cut here when we get up to the actual cabinet, that we actually have at least half a tile's width to put in. Okay? So what I'll do is I'll take the actual tiling gauge now like so, and what I'll do is I'll position it as if I were going to start with a full tile on the line. So what will happen is I will have a full tile here, okay, and I'll just grab another tile to illustrate, right? And then I will position another tile like so, leaving the joint line there. And as you can see, that would leave me with a really, really awkward smidgen of a cut around that cabinet, which wouldn't look good, would be difficult to really actually execute, and then to actually make it stay in place would be very, very difficult. So in order to actually rectify that problem, all I've got to do to make sure I get half a tile's width of a cut around that cabinet is simply move the tiling gauge back half a tile's width. And because I'm coming off a central layout, if I only move it half the tiles width every single time, that will guarantee that I'm going to have equal cuts either side. And in turn, guarantee that ultra professional finish. So here's how it goes. We know it's a smidgen of a cut here, which is really aesthetically undesirable and really hard to actually cut. So all I do is move it back one half a tile's width. That's why I marked in those half tiles when I was laying out the wall previously. So I move it back half a tile's width, and I start with the tile dead centre on the actual layout line. And now I can see I've got a full tile from there to there, and all I've got to do then is move up here, and you can see that I've quite clearly got half a tile's width to cut around the cabinet. And likewise, off a central starting point, we're going to have equal cuts either side. So we'll have a full tile here, and as you can see then, we've got about half a tile's width there that we're going to have to cut around the cabinet. So perfectly symmetrical layout left to right. Now what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we're going to get a perfectly symmetrical layout of the cabinet in relation to the underside of the cabinet, off the countertop in relation to the underside of the cabinet here. And what we do again is the exact same process, okay? We've simply got to literally take the batten, and what we'll do is to establish the actual starting point of the first tile for our vertical run is to do what we've done every other time. We'll start with the tile, actually a full tile on the line first off, and we'll see we've got a full tile there. So in this scenario we'll have a full tile, we'll have another full tile, and then you think to yourself, is I'm going to get another full tile in there? But if you actually check it, you'll see you've actually got a really awkward sliver of a cut, which is what we don't want. And like every other single time, in order to achieve equal cuts, top and bottom, left to right, all we've got to do, because we're coming off that central layout, all we've got to do is move the actual batten down half a tile's width, and then we'll know that we've got an equal off cut down here, or a margin tile cut here, and an equal cut up here as well. Okay, so all we then do is pick up the position of our very last whole tile, which is just here like so. And all we've got to do then to make sure that we're going to have level joint lines all the way up the wall is to literally register that batten on that mark there that we've made, that denotes the position at the bottom of the last whole tile. So I register the batten against that mark, and then using the level here, I'm going to make sure I get a level batten on the wall. So that's now level there.
Go.
Okay, so we've registered a batten perfectly level in relation to that actual mark we made on the wall to denote the bottom of the last whole tile. Now all I've got to do is just screw that to the wall. And I know I'm right because I'm after making the marks there already, so I know I'm dead level. Okay, so we now know that our first whole tile is going to start on the batten and dead centre of that layout line, and that's going to give us that symmetrical layout that we've been looking for. Now, best practice tip here is, folks, okay, is to actually transfer that level line out onto the batten, onto the face of the batten, because we want to actually be able to see that to actually position the tile. Once the adhesive goes on, sometimes it smears out over that line and we can't see it. So just putting it there will actually make sure we're going to be able to position it correctly when we get to actually start laying the field tiles. Okay, so in terms of laying the field tiles, it's very, very simple, okay? Earlier on in the session I alluded to the fact that if you use the correct trowel, in this scenario a wall trowel, you can't actually put on the wrong amount of adhesive, okay? Another thing you're going to have to make sure you do in order to apply the right amount of adhesive to the wall is when you actually apply the adhesive to the wall, hold the trowel at roughly a 45-degree angle, and as you draw it up the wall, you want to hear that scraping noise, okay? So 45 degrees, and hear that scraping actually up the wall, okay? And if you can, make sure the ridge is okay. Now there's no act of parliament in this, but try your best to get this correct if you can most of the time. It's actually between the actual the ridges. You want to be actually able to see the actual wall, see the substrate that you're laying